Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Modern Web Podcast. I am your host, Rob Ocel. I'm an architect at This.Labs. Today, I'm extremely excited to sit down and talk about the Angular Renaissance with Alyssa Nicoll and Mark Thompson, better known as Mark Texan. Alyssa is a senior developer advocate at Progress, and Mark is the senior developer relations engineer on the Angular team at Google. Alyssa, Mark, how are you both doing?
Hi. So good. So good to be here.
Yeah, feeling good, feeling great. Thanks for having me. Thanks for being a part of the Angular community, and thanks for hosting this conversation.
I just want to say first and foremost, Mark, you sound amazing. Your mic sounds great. So close, picking up your voice beautifully. Everybody wants to thank you for that.
This is Rob trying to trigger our beloved Mark into a mic conversation.
No, that's good. I'm not going to let him do it. I'm not going to fall for the bait, but thank you for noticing that I am using the appropriate mic for the format.
Wonderful. Part of the reason we're sitting down here today is because we are at an exciting time in Angular. Some people, Alyssa yourself included, have dubbed this the Angular Renaissance. And we are also on the precipice of yet another Angular release, which to me is impressive on its own, that there are just things you can count on, right? It's taxes and it's 2 Angular releases a year. I don't know exactly how that saying goes precisely, but you have made this 2 release a year commitment for several years without breaking it. And honestly, being software developers here and seeing every other library out in the world, that alone is incredibly impressive. So we are here to celebrate both of those things. To get us started, Alyssa, I got a chance to listen to your talk, The Angular Renaissance, at KCDC. I'm wondering if you can kind of explain to people, I guess, a little bit what you were saying, but also a little bit about why you think we are in an Angular Renaissance.
Absolutely. And you can show my slides if you want, but this will be good for those audio learners, listeners also. Just to abbreviate the version, because this talk is quite a long one that I give in person. But I liken it to the Angular Renaissance, and it was actually Manfred Steyer who I actually heard, and I think before that it might have been Rachel who had called it this. So I am not the OG coiner of the Angular Renaissance, want to point out. But when I heard it, I was like, yes, absolutely. And this was even before control flow, whenever people were starting to talk about this Renaissance. And I think it really, at least, and Mark, I'd love to have your point of view, because I give it from the GDE community point of view and from things I've heard different Google team members say throughout the years. But I really think it was after the turning point of 2.0, we had kind of grown to a point where we needed a new view engine in order to start having these innovations and this growth. And so I think once we switched to Ivy and that was set and ready to go, we could actually start work and movement on some of these other features. And a lot of these features are all developer facing. They're the actual developer experience. And so like the OG Renaissance, Angular's experiencing this flux of innovation that has expressed intent of expanding the human potential, right? The developer potential for successful use. And so I think that's how I liken it to the OG Renaissance. But we'd love to hear Mark's take on what's going on.
I think that we had an interesting period with the transition for Ivy. For example, there was a time where we were like, okay, we're going to do this thing with Ivy. And everything is going to be super awesome. Everybody's super excited, except for, I think it took us longer than we maybe anticipated. And so while we were trailblazing before, a lot of things that we brought into the industry where, other frameworks learned from and grew and adopted. For example, we were the first framework to use TypeScript as the primary language. That was just it. We brought in, the use of observables at the core part of the framework. That was it. And we had this idea of reactivity that I think people learned from the choices that we made. I won't say that people took them and, copied, but they learned from the choices they made, even with our reactivity model with change detection, right? And so going through that and then having this kind of quiet period where some really fantastic innovations hit the industry, we were trying to finish this migration over from Vue engine to Ivy, but now, because, that opened a really big door for us. And now we're able to just start to deliver and deliver and deliver. And I don't want to set any expectations around how long that delivery will continue to happen with these really blockbuster, kind of headline features, but we're really excited about where Angular is able to go, and we're even more excited to be able to bring that to fruition.
I love it. Absolutely. And I'm glad we were on point with a lot of the GDEs were speculating. We're like, we're pretty sure it was the view engine holding us back. And that's why there's rapid fire afterwards. But I didn't know, Rob, if you had specific parts that you wanted to talk about or any other questions on that.
Well, yeah, I think, though, before we dive into some of the more things that I think that are currently happening that are sort of driving this feeling of excitement, I did
Sure.
want to kind of look backwards a little bit, because one of the things in your talk that really stood out to me was this walk down memory lane since the NG comps of yore, and maybe thinking back to 2016, because you tell some stories of having been a part of this community at all the stages along the road. And I remember I happened to be at NGConf 2016 purely by happenstance and coincidence, by just a lucky coincidence, to see the same kind of announcement of Angular 2 and how
Yes.
close it was coming. And I guess, can you kind of remind people of just the journey that we've been on, as you remember at some of those points, especially early on of when it was coming out?
Yeah. So I like a lot of, I'll kind of explain why I took us down memory lane, 'cause I'm not very sentimental. I'm very much like a goldfish. So if something has a milestone in my mind, it was pretty big to leave that mark. And so for me, a lot of developers, as I'm talking about the Angular Renaissance and these new features and these things going forward in the framework that are just, in my mind, amazing and exciting, there's also a lot of trepidation. And I've had it asked, even in chat. I think in my talk, I have a screenshot of, I was talking about this on Angular Air, and there was a couple of questions in chat of like, yes, but how should the community take this, right? Shouldn't we be, more fearful than excited? And I'm like, okay, let's talk about this. And I think it really comes back down to, like you're talking about in 2016, when the Angular team pulled the plug on the existing framework. The 2.0 was a rewrite. It was a brand new framework, and there there was a lot of. I laugh because in one of my slides I put a tombstone, and I was like, for standalone, I said RIP modules. And it was kind of my nod to that talk back in 2016, because tombstone after tombstone came up on the screen. Was it Brad Green? Was it? I think it was.
Oh my goodness.
Do you remember this?
Right.
And they were like, rip this feature of Angular 1, rip this feature of Angular 1. And I started getting tears in the audience, because I was like, but this is my framework. You can't take this from me, right? And I think it's not just Angular, and it's not just JavaScript. I started learning .NET, and I'm learning so many developers are insanely wary of new things. They're just terrified that it's going to be taken from them, or that something's going to shift in a very uncomfortable or unmanageable way. And so for me, one of my like notes that I like to end this talk on is talking about this mindset going forward, of growth, and how really over and over again, the Angular team since 2.0 has made a huge effort of not having anything be a breaking change and having opt-in things. Right now, the three big things that we talk about are opt-in. You don't have to kill your modules if you don't want to, right? And I talk about true as like, one day, if there's complete adoption and everyone's like, yes, standalone is the way of the future, I could see a completely moduleless Angular. But I think the entire community has to stand up and like move forward with that in order for the Angular team to move forward with that. So I think that was one of the big moments that I remember with the tombstones and the 2.0 change. And that's something that I talk about, is just that we have not seen such a flurry of innovations in our framework since 2.0. But this seems like it's done in a very conscientious, backward compatible way. And so, Mark, I don't know if you want to talk to that as far as from the team's point of view, but.
Yeah, I think that one of the hard things about change in the overall. So if you think about when people say things like, "Oh, well, they killed Angular 1," or Angular. Well, so one, let's use the language like AngularJS and Angular, right?
Yes.
So AngularJS just hit end of life I think maybe within the last 2 years. So we still supported the framework for a while. So we never stranded the developers and say, well, migrate to Angular or else you're toast, right? So even back then we had the beginnings of what became kind of our hallmark, which is bringing everyone forward. And we said that in a lot of talks. Even when I got here, we said that in a ton of talks. Like, we're going to bring the community forward. And I didn't even fully understand the value of it until I started to see how it impacted teams. Because just like you said, everything is opt-in for the most part, right? And when you want to do standalone, opt-in. If you want to do signals, opt-in. You want to do control flow, opt-in. Your old directives still work. Your old modules still work. Like, everything still works.
Yes.
So you get to come along on this journey at your pace. Of course, we'd love for folks to just dive in and upgrade to the latest, but we all know if you have a million lines of code, there's just no way that you can migrate, as quickly as we're releasing features. So as a way to support those folks, we try to introduce migrations to help. And, we try not to, like you said, break stuff. We really try to avoid breaking changes that are not opt out, right? Or sorry, opt in, where you can just choose when you're ready for that.
And what I like about your talk, Alyssa, which is that I am just such a believer in stories. I like to be that person in organizations too. The kind of person that when people are having a conversation, like, I have no idea why things are that way here. And it's like, well, sit down and let me tell you a story of a funny project that happened 3 years ago that became a meme at the company. And it's like, it's like people that were around long enough remember the AngularJS thing. It's just Angular. And of course, like the Angular 4 version, the first seemingly skipped version, when they had to resynchronize all the versions of the libraries because they thought for a little while maybe they could get them to go up separately as one another. And they had to skip Angular 3 or whatever to go to Angular 4. And like, I just love the idea of capturing these stories and sharing them with each other as a community. Like, I just feel like there aren't enough talks of people grabbing the stories and the things that matter to a community and kind of bringing them forward again. I'm kind of curious why you chose to include that portion in your talk. Is it similar? Like, why is it fun to look back at all these NG comps that you were a part of or that you were hosting, or these events and these things that you can remember and share them again with a fresh audience maybe?
No, for me, Angular, I was back in college. I went to my first degree was in psychology. And after that, I was looking at getting my master's, but I really lost my passion. I don't know if you know this, but at least at the time, a lot of psychology on the medicinal side was just how to survive an illness. It was at least the vibe in the scientific community wasn't how are we going to cure this. And so for me, I was like a huge bummer. I came in it with a very optimistic, let's do this. And then I kind of walked away from it like with this very sad of like, oh, okay. And so from there, my boyfriend, now husband, was learning programming at Full Sail. And so I was like, teach me, let me try that. And so I dabbled with it for a bit and I was like, yeah, I want to go to school for this. And so we were in the mountains of Colorado at the time and moved back. And I went to Full Sail and I learned web development and web design. And one of my first because you go through these different, like, first you have to learn design and all of the like aspects of that. And then you get to start to dabble with HTML and then JavaScript and then some backend languages. And so one of my first frameworks, the very first framework actually that I was introduced to, it was just because my college teacher at the time, she was really into it, and it was AngularJS. And she was like, yeah, it's this new thing. Why don't you give it a try? And I just remember this magic moment of like 3-way binding, and it like started working. And I was like, oh my God, like I was in the lab, it was late at night, and I was just like, oh my God, the internet, it's magic. Look at this. Like I did it, right? And things were updating and it was so reactive, and I was just in love. And I have been in love with Angular and with the Angular community from that day. No matter what languages I learn, what frameworks I get into, that will always be my home. It's been a fantastic place to learn and grow. And I think NGConf has been a really big part of that. I started giving talks from the time that I graduated because I wanted to teach what I was learning in my day job. And NGConf just naturally came in because I was doing Angular development and learning actually getting to know the team members and the community through that conference and through other really cool Angular conferences. I don't know, it's just meant a lot to me. And so I think that's why it comes up in this talk, because um, as I'm teaching things about signals, or as I'm teaching things about just, this mindset and the worries and the fears that I hear, those are my people. And I want to comfort them, and I want to relate to them and explain, like, look, this isn't like the first time that, frameworks have gone through these sort of things. And this is exciting. This isn't scary. And so, but as far as like specific stories, I'm trying to think of, is there anything a specific story you wanted me to reminisce on, Rob, or is there?
Oh, I don't know. I just didn't. I guess if there's any other sort of iconic moments. I mean, before we started recording this, I was, reminiscing about some of Shai's old skits that he would do at NG Comps.
Yes. No, I met Shai a while ago, golly, and he and I would collab on different things. Like we got to do the NG rap together, which the guys were like finishing writing the rap song like the night before we went on stage, and they were like, just like walk up there and do some cool poses while you do your lines. And I was like, I have no idea what that even means. What is a cool pose? So it was the guy, they were all just like looking at me, and I'm like, do you realize I am not only nerd, but I am female? So when you're like, yeah, just go up there and do a rap song and look cool while you do it, I'm like, what does that even mean? So no, there's a lot of fun.
Suddenly never become more aware of your hands than when somebody asks you to go act naturally or cool.
Oh my God, yes. And Shai Resnick, me, and Stephen Fluin were actually hanging out. We were doing NG Poland, and we were hanging out, and we were eating ice cream, and it was just one of my favorite memories of like travel. And Shai kept getting mad at me because he was tethering off my phone, and we were in this marketplace, and the guys were following me, but I kept getting distracted by the marketplace, and they would lose me and they'd panic, and he'd be like, I can't get signal. Where is she? And so a lot of fun memories of getting to hang out with really cool. Stephen Fluin used to be on the team. Mark, did you meet Stephen before he gallivanted off into the crypto world? Yes. But yes, lots of good times.
and Mark, you can talk about this too, which is that I have a very similar story to yours, Alyssa, which is just that like when I was a web developer as a teenager, and then went and did desktop development for a long time before deciding to come back. And so learning AngularJS with Dan Whalen, like that guy will always mean a lot to me, because it was like his how to learn, AngularJS helped me get up to speed with the job that I had, doing web development. And so, yeah, same as you, this community's always had a soft spot in my heart, even if I'm working in other frameworks at the time. And I think it's a testament to that kind of like, you can sit with us ethos that's always been a big part of the community, very welcoming. This has always been an extraordinarily welcoming community, and that really has not changed. And I mean, Mark, I don't know if you can speak to that, like how, that's an intentional thing or something that y'all try to keep going over all these years.
So community, or at least I believe this, I believe that you can have the best tools in the universe. You can have the best like experiences, but the community is what takes the tool or platform to the next level. And so for the Angular team, it's always been a priority to make sure that the community feels supported, that they feel supported, they feel heard. And that's been a really big thing where we've made significant changes around that, right? So before, think about the past, right? Before, maybe 3-4 years ago, if you wanted to know what we were doing, you had to maybe go to a conference or catch one of us one-on-one, right? This is before the roadmap became a primary like mode of communication. Mm-hmm. And then things like the RFC process that we've spent a lot of time with, right? And that's become a really big thing for us. Like, yeah, we're going to make a big change. Let's hear from the community. Then we got the developer survey. So all those are like those are just like avenues of pathways, right? That we're able to communicate with the community and stay connected. And then me, myself, as a DevRel engineer, I like getting out in the streets and talking to people. And I really like just let people know that like, we are very happy that you are a part of the Angular community, and it will always be a core thing. Like one of our core value was to make sure that we foster a community where everybody feels welcomed.
Do you think it's true because of the way the Angular team makes themselves available and has always been community driven, that it's like a trickle down thing? Or do you like, why do you think our community is so fire? Because like I hear that from quite a few people that it does feel different. So
Well, I think that we're lucky that the people, seriously, because I think that you could try to create this and not be successful and follow the same patterns that we did. I think that we're very fortunate that the people who decided to be a part of the community, people like yourselves, right, what you continue to foster in the community, because again, we're just the team, the core team, but there are people who connect with you all, who get to see your talks, listen to your podcast, who get to engage with Angular through you. So you are just as big of a part of making sure that community stays as healthy and as thriving as we are, because we're doing it all together.
Yeah, it's really true, right? I mean, like another big pillar of the community, like the NG Girls organization, another phenomenal organization. And I agree with you. I think a lot of it is around the types of volunteers and the types of organizers. When you put out those good signals and you sort of start to create a good community, you attract the types of people that want to build a better community. And that kind of thing can just continue to snowball on itself. And it really, the Angular community is really rich for all of the different ways that it has for people to kind of be supported and get involved. I mean, there's more than we could even name here, other communities that are on Discords and all over the place, just helping each other out, supporting each other, teaching each other, and things like that. Well, great. Well, we are going to pivot into a discussion of where we are now in the midst of this renaissance. But first, a word from our sponsor. So our sponsor today is This.Labs. This.Labs is a development consultancy that specializes in application development and upgrading legacy systems. They've been trusted by companies like PlayStation, Capital One, Herman Miller, PayPal, and T-Mobile. Facing challenges with legacy systems and need to modernize, This.Labs has experience in enterprise migrations and upgrades, providing a detailed roadmap for modernizing your software solutions. Their engineering leaders are industry veterans with a deep understanding of modern technologies and best practices. Learn more about how This.Labs can help you achieve your tech goals at this.co. That's THISDOT.co. All right, now back to our show. Thank you both. So we want to talk about where we are now. As I said, we are standing here on the precipice of Angular v17, at least at the time that we record this, which is at the beginning of October. I think it's due out in about a month or so. Who knows? I'm just going off of what I saw on the blog. So, we're also still freshly from Angular 16, which kind of had, I think, the beginnings of the signals preview. So I think we're right in the heart of like signals, this kind of control flow time. And I would say maybe as opposed to what 15 and 14 would be from the year prior, a lot of big shifts, it feels like this year. I mean, I guess we came out of some of the features that we were talking about earlier with, that can get us towards standalone components and things like that, which was a pretty big thing. But I guess to start out, what are we most excited about for either this upcoming release or what's the buzz that we've heard from the community on some of these features coming up?
Go ahead, Alyssa. I know you.
I was like, Mark.
Before.
No, I just know that I think are all the RFCs closed right now, requests for comments, because I think the last one for control flow just closed, which to me is exciting because it means things are moving forward. They've gotten feedback from the community. I'm trying to think, Mark, is Signals still RC or where is it?
It's in developer preview. I don't know if the RFC still
okay.
Yeah. Okay. We're still sorting things out. Yeah.
And then control flow as well, or is that not in developer preview? What is that?
You can't. I mean, if you check one of the RCs, you might be able to get your hands on it.
Okay.
For early preview, but we're hoping to get into developer preview coming up.
Awesome, because those are things that I personally am looking forward to as they move forward, whether it's in 17 or beyond. Just as those stabilize, but not only that, but standalone, which was released a while ago. Just I'm really excited about the community supporting that because being able to move forward without modules for me was like a moment of like, you can't take my modules, but I I do see the benefits, and I think if the community does fully embrace it, it's going to be a really exciting time for Angular. But I would love to hear from Mark as far as like, have you heard different pieces that people are looking forward to, or
Well, I can tell you what I think is the most slept on part of Angular
Ooh.
right now that people should be paying much more attention to. And that's server side Angular. I think that the streets
Okay.
really need to like wake up a bit more and tap into what's happening around Angular on the server. We're doing some stuff that is just wildly valuable for teams and for people with scalable applications. I mean, how much do you want me to talk about this? Because I want to
No,
gush
I mean,
about it.
please,
No,
please do, because
absolutely.
I do think that with the success of things like Next, and when you see each new framework's felt kit
Sure.
and Party Town and what all this Quick City stuff going out, that like this has become the thing. I think a lot of people are curious what the present and future has for Angular on the server.
Well, I could just tell you about how big of a shift hydration was. So having full hydration in applications like
Mm.
that brings us completely in line with what's available, right? So having an application such that you could pre-render on the server, or not pre-render server, that's a different technology. You could server-side render the application, send that up to the client, and then have the client kind of pick up and just use the existing stuff and not do what we did before hydration, which was kind of destroy everything, rebuild it. And so you got that flicker effect that people spent hours and hours trying to like get around. But so now you don't have that. But let me tell you what is very, very special. And I know I wish people could see me who are people who are listening. I would say how excited I am. What we're doing around defer
Mm.
is 100%, in my opinion, unlike anything anybody else is doing. Because the control that you can get for so think about defer like this. Like usually you can tag like components and like or put them in boundaries, right? Like, okay, load this later. With like defer, you could do that in your template, right? So like you put it in your template, but we can also go all the way down to like lazy loading based on like a trigger. Right. So if you hover over it or you interact with something else within the view, or it's idle, and then we can customize that even further and say things like, well, then prefetch this specific thing. And then you can do custom triggers where you can say, well, only trigger this deferred loading when some part of my state reaches a particular value. Right. I mean, like there are all of these like super like special controls that you get with our deferred stuff. And it just creates a place where developers can make whatever they want, right? Like if you can think of a use case for yourself for like deferred lazy loading for optimizing your applications, like this is a space where you can now do things that were only like dreamt of before. It's really special stuff.
Is defer related to the full hydration? Like
Defer is a little bit of both, but it's more around like what we get, like the block syntax with like control flow that we're getting.
Yeah.
That enables us to start doing this type of stuff. So yeah, we're cooking. I'm gonna tell you that now. We're just cooking with some of this stuff, and it's really, really incredible when you think about it.
I don't want to draw lines where they don't need to be, but this just reminds me of some of the conversations around like React server components or like the suspense stuff. And it's like, it's really becoming a situation where I don't know that we can really call ourselves front end devs anymore. Like you almost start as like full stack by default, because like it is increasingly getting difficult to abstract this away of like, where's this code running? Is it running like at all? Was it rendered and then it never happened again? So stuff like this is, like you said, really exciting. It sounds like, to unlock some of these additional capabilities. Is the hope
new performance patterns? No, I'm saying just new performance patterns that you can enable for your application.
Is the hope that this becomes like the feature in and of itself, or does the team sort of see this as the primitive that library authors might take advantage of to build frameworks or supportive frameworks or anything like that of the nature? Or is that not really settled on? Like for now, this just enables some optimizations, and we'll see where it goes.
I think we'll see where it goes because, like I said, the defer syntax is still very. It's not, you can't even do it yet, right? I mean, this is still upcoming stuff. So we haven't even seen how the community wants to use it yet and what they'll want to create. And that's usually what happens when you create anything. You have an intention and you say what this is for, and then suddenly, this long pole that was meant to like knock down cobwebs is also very great at like, being a back scratcher. And you're like, I had no idea anybody was going to do that. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
it seems like you like intentionally are waiting for that though. It's always interesting to me how the team does almost be like, okay, now go. And they like push a Lego block towards us, like carefully. And they like back away. And I'm like, what?
Right. And go and build and then, discover. Because that's the one thing about a very engaged community is that they will discover things that you couldn't discover yourself. And it's not, at the point of trying to be like, oh, well, test this for us. It's more like, we think here's what you'll do, but we're sure you're going to go even further beyond that.
One thing that which we skipped over as far as what makes the Angular community and the Angular team so great is that when I was looking up an explanation of this control flow, I stumbled on a very recent blog by Alex Rickabaugh. And not only does he go into the syntax of it, but then makes reference to why the RFC sort of resolved this way with survey results from the Angular Developer Survey.
That's right.
Which is another great way of getting developer feedback, which I love. And I loved reading it because when I saw it, I was like, well, I was okay with the syntax the way it was, right? As a Angular JS developer, I was like, hey, whatever. This all sounds very familiar to me. So I could take it either which way. But it was so fascinating to see the real data that the team is looking at and just saying like, hey, this is a data-driven decision. We love to hear
evidence-driven is a better way to say it.
I'm sorry. Yeah, there you go. Like that. And, I'm not used to seeing that when teams are introducing new features. And when I got to that part of the blog, I actually was really kind of taken back. I was like, this is really cool that you're going to sell us the feature, not just on syntax or promise, but also just in terms of, that the community seems to be responding to it.
Yeah, no, this is a great process. I love that we get to communicate with the community in such a way that we can get that type of feedback. And, I think that one of the best things about this team that I've learned since I've been here is that they are so willing to learn and they're so eager to learn and to make choices that are the results of like this evidence of, because you could do whatever you want, right? As a developer or maintainer of a framework, you can do whatever you want. And it is a mistake, I think, to not include your community in that process, especially when it becomes a part of people's livelihoods and a part of people's everyday life. I mean, Angular JS specifically changed my life, right? Like I was a Java developer, like so many people, writing enterprise Java beans for healthcare company. And then I see the same experience that Alyssa mentioned, this idea of just like two-way binding, and then you're typing in an input and then the screen is updating in real time. And I knew how hard that was to implement directly. And it felt so magical. And honestly, I believe that what we're doing with Defer will recreate that magic for people.
Oh, that's so exciting. Well, if someone wants to like try it out though, they have to wait for like they go and pull down sneaky RCs, or they just like play around with like
well, we're close.
We're close.
We're close.
Okay.
Let's just say that we're close. We always release things when they're ready, but we're close. But I can't wait for people to show their creative combinations of custom triggers. And when I say custom, and I don't mean that they have to go and write a directive or they have to go and create all the extra code. I mean, just using the primitives that we're going to give you, that you'll put the combination together to show these performance and like lazy loading patterns. Like you'll be able to do that out of the box without you needing to become a library author yourself, right? That's what also makes it so special, is that it's not like a bunch of syntax where you're like, okay, here are these primitives, now go build a house on top of it and show us your house. It's like, no, here are all the parts. Arrange the toy cars as you like, right? And create your own like environment there. Like just do it and let us know how much how much is helping or not helping. Let us know. But I think when you start seeing demos of people showing like interaction on hover, and then they have their like console up, right? And they've shown all the pieces of the application being loaded at different times on different triggers that they decided on, right? And how frictionless it was to create that. That's what I think is going to create that special feeling again for people.
Oh, I'm excited for it. Is it ever scary, Mark, having your framework out there so vulnerable, it seems? Because it does seem like you and the team so very often are like, here is this piece we poured our heart into. I hope you like it.
Well, when I joined the Angular team, I actually had got a tough lesson. It was just it was at a time where we were being criticized quite a bit by lots of people. And people were just, fairly or unfairly. I'm not here to judge like the valid, what I mean? Because people's feelings are always valid, right? Like you don't want to dismiss someone's feelings. And I would say we were under a lot of like criticism constantly. And it gave me like really tough skin because I understood that like if we make something that people don't like, it's never because they don't like us. It's not personal. It's because whatever we've offered isn't what they need. Right. And it's not what they want, or it's something like just not considering them. So when you think about it from that point of view, it kind of changes the way that you interact with people and interact with like the feedback that you get. It's like people are like, oh, I don't like this course that you made because I have too many errors. I'm like, okay, that's a good point. All right, we can improve there. Versus being like, what do you mean you don't like this course? I poured my heart and soul into this damn course. You know what I mean? And it's like, all right, it's usually you wanting something that you're hoping we're going to give you, and then if we don't give it to you, of course it's frustrating. Of course it's disappointing.
I mean, no judgment about where the community was before, but I do think that that's indicative of this era of Angular, at least, and it's that like a removal from ego. It's funny that you put it that way because I feel the same way sometimes about failure. I think when you have teams that hate to fail, and they're really bad around failure, a lot of times it's because failure is usually ascribed to individuals and about their worth, and ego gets caught into it, right? Like you failed and that means you're bad. But when failures can switch over to something where it's more like, ooh, there's a problem, how can we solve it? And it becomes like a collaborative thing that becomes egoless. Failure suddenly doesn't matter as much. It becomes much more of like we got to clean this up. And I think you can definitely see that spirit, not to say it wasn't this way in the past, but you can definitely feel that spirit here because so many of the features are just like, hey, you've had developer experience issues. Boom, we hear you. Boom, we hear you. Like you said, it's not trying to sell, this is my artistic vision of the perfect front end framework. It's just like, hey, where are your hardships? Let's just plug those because that's what this is. It's meant to be a tool. And I think that is, at least as a community member, the sensation I'm feeling as I see each of these releases go out. And it's hard to find a hater on Twitter these days. Not that there aren't some out there, but just everyone's just like, okay, I don't have that problem anymore. Like each release, like it's harder and harder to find people that have anything negative to say about them because it's less about
Mark says they're out there. I don't know.
I believe you, Mark. You're exposed to a lot more of them than I would be, but I do feel like, I think that's like the Renaissance feeling that people are getting. Would you both agree that like people are, when you're just getting versions that are just out there trying to solve problems and not trying to sell you on this is the way it should be, this is how you need to change your mindset, I think people really respond well to that.
I think us focusing on making Angular the best framework it could possibly be for Angular developers is paying off. It's not really about like, oh, how do we become? So Jeremy Elborn, our team lead, and myself have a live stream, and we often get asked this question every time.
Which one?
And they say, what do you think about Svelte? What do you think about React? What do you think about Vue? What do you think about Solid? What do you think about everything? And we always say, everything is pretty great. We're at a time, there's never been a better time to like write web applications. We're at a time right now where it's hard to make a bad choice. And that was not always the case. And sometimes there were bad choices like, yeah, don't use that thing. That thing is not even complete. But now there are many passionate, frameworks out there, right? And framework maintainers who are just trying to build the best tools for their community. And I think that when we decided to do that, we started, like you said, focusing on pain points of developers, right? And look at hydration, a perfect example of a pain point for developers. Look at signals, a perfect example of a pain point because you had to know too much with change detection.
I mean, look at standalone, right? Like we're onboarding people to learn a completely unique piece, a completely like unique building block it was a
Right.
pain point and it was a struggle. And I think that's where the ego has been removed, Mark. I think you put it beautifully of like building the best that Angular could be, like period. And that idea and that momentum is very self-evident. And it's exciting.
Yeah. I can talk all day about this, so please somebody else talk, because I will just keep going on and on. I got my little soapbox
I
right
have
here.
one more question while we're on the precipice of this conversation, because I wonder, is it ever difficult to juggle the community and like moving Angular forward for the community versus, I know internally, Angular is, at least I think, first and foremost for development for Google products. Do those two things ever differ, like in what they need?
Sometimes we just can't do features that people want on both sides.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the hard part. It's like, yeah, this won't work for, internal applications, or apps, like Google applications. And sometimes it's like, yeah, this is a thing that would be cool, but we can't really make it work out for like externally. Of course, I'm not at liberty to give you any details about which things those are. Because I know it's probably the next question. Like, Mark, what's an example of something you can't do?
No, I honestly thought you would say no. Actually, they have the same needs, and so I'm like, okay, so they are different. Like sometimes with certain.
Sometimes they're different.
Things. Okay.
Sometimes the needs are different, but I think I work with a lot of very smart people, and I really do mean that. I work with some really brilliant engineers who are thoughtful, and they're always thinking about problems that I don't, they even myself just like, I don't know how to solve this or what the right thing to do here is. But luckily our team, when we put our brains together, we're able to really come up with solutions that mitigate the impact of those like kind of rough spots where we're like, yeah, we want to do this, but would this work here? Probably not. I don't know what, we don't know if this can be an internal or external thing. Like they find great solutions for all those problems. It's really, it's humbling working on this team with such brilliant people, because you can walk around and think that you're pretty smart, and then you meet the people like that build these types of tools. And not even on the Angular team, like I met some other framework maintainers. I'm like, man, these people are just really like S tier, like brilliant. And it's really humbling in a good way, because it makes me want to stay focused and continue to contribute, because if they're putting their like, best effort in, I should be putting my best effort in, right, to serve the community and things that I'm brilliant at, and making sure that we can bring all our powers together to create something very special for everyone.
Well, I know that signals are all the rage these days. Solid and had them. We have Svelte runes that were announced. I feel like Vue's announced some version of it as well. Angular has theirs. And I think, I guess I would say that most people are excited by the idea, but there certainly has been two sides to this. So I think the way that I want to ask this question is, Brandon Roberts had just an open thought, a free thought that he posted, which was something like, how do we prevent signals from becoming the next Ivy? Meaning something that's pretty substantial to the framework that might change a lot of the innards that people are just waiting on to see when it lands, and thinking that that will be like a pivot point for the whole community. Like, so Mark, my question for you is just, how do you and how does the team manage that in light of knowing that maybe the Ivy thing in the past was a stumbling block? Do you just reject this comparison entirely, or do you think that there are lessons learned there? And then when he's done, Alyssa, my question is, but for everybody else, can you get us excited for why you're so excited for signals to come?
Yes.
I think that we are a team that has learned from all kind of decisions, right? We've learned from our experiences, and even with the whole signals thing. I mean, so this is why it's really valuable that things are released when they're ready. And the framework can move forward because of the way we do our implementation of our opt-in policy right now for like these major features, because we're not, so look, while we're waiting to finish signals, look what else you're getting, right? Like, look how else the framework is moving forward. Look at all these other really special features. Like I said, the server-side storage in Angular is like, I feel like we could have entire shows just talking about how that has changed the game for people. You see where I'm kind of going with that? So I think that we are very well aware that we don't want to take too long, but we also know that if we rush it and we get it wrong, there's also a consequence, right? And so you have to make that tough decision. You have to think about like, okay, what is the right like velocity to go at? And I think that internally the teams have talked, and we have a good idea about what the right velocity is. And then once signals hits and we're able to make it meet the needs of the developers, because that's what it's all about, meeting needs of developers. Right now, change detection is troublesome, problematic at scale. All right. That is a problem that once that's fixed, Angular will never be the same.
Yes.
Seriously.
No,
Like,
I absolutely agree with you.
What will you complain about if your change detection gives you like the ability to have precise updates?
I
You don't
honestly
need to go into the internals.
I don't know if we would call it change detection at that point.
It's
Like,
still change detection, right? It's
is
just based
is
on
it?
signal.
Oh, right, but
Right.
like it's without, because right now the current proper way of handling reactivity in
Those are
Angular.
your rap hands.
Yeah. I'm
That's what
so
you
cool.
did.
I'm so cool, Mark. You can't even.
You are.
That's
You
easy.
are. That's good.
No. So currently we look to observables and on push, right?
Okay.
And these things, they with all things with Zone.js, they come with this change detection cost. But I feel like as we move forward and get rid of Zone.js, which
Optional Zone.js.
does that scare you? Like, just saying those words, like I don't want to frighten people. I have frightened people in the past by saying those words because certain people have really strong opinions in favor or against Zone.js, and it's
Think about Zone.js, like it's become like a boogeyman for people for some reason.
Oh my god! I'm just like, I have to like kind of like brace myself for when I mention this part of the reactive story.
So like, here's the thing, and this is my opinion, at least.
Yes.
Zones are a really brilliant idea. It's just at scale, we found the limitations, right? At scale for the types of apps that people decided to build, we found the limitations, because think about how in almost any other framework, except, well, I know Svelte was a little different because they have a compiler before runes. They would like use their compiler to figure out what you changed, right? But think about like this whole cool thing where it's like, yo, I could just make a change to the state of the component and it will just pick it up and things will just work. I don't have to think more about it. That is really magical, right? Like I remember when I was teaching React before I came to the Angular team, and I remember looking for the set state. I'm like, where is set state? Where is it? I need it because I don't know how to tell this thing something changed.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait, it just knows? And that is like brilliant. So that's why I'm like, if people like Zone.js, they should, because there's so much to like.
Yeah,
sorry.
Oh no, I think you're right. I think it's the at scale part maybe that broke down. And also there's just some weird things with Zone.js that different people will complain about, as like things like the promises, right? Like where instead of native async can await, or
Right.
the errors can be really hard to read. Zone.js modifies JavaScript objects, right? It uses black magic, and generally black magic is frowned upon, right? There's a lot of reasons why people don't like Zone.js. But for me, as we look forward to signals, and you can show this meme that I totally made, all of these slides were generated with AI. You're welcome. That's why these people don't quite look like people or have mouths, but that's totally fine.
That's why the hands are off screen. We get it.
I know, but this was my look back on I think the slide that you're talking about with the tombstones. But I think in order to move away from Zone.js, but still have reactivity, we have to look to a solution like Signals. And I honestly, I don't, that's why I was wondering, like, Mark, do we really still call it change detection? Because change detection right now is like, it's going down this tree and it's like checking the child nodes and the other child nodes, and it's saying who needs to be updated. Whereas with Signals, it knows who needs the other end of this, right? There is no detecting of this change. It happens because it's connected. And so for me, that's where I was like, is it change detection? I don't know. Like, I would love to hear you.
So I think we'll finalize this language when we are ready for, production style where zones have been, where change detection or the process of figuring out what to render on the screen has been updated to not use zones, right? Once we get there, we'll finalize what it is. But here's my conjecture. I think that going away from change detection as a name might be problematic.
Because why? Because people know what it is, or
because people know what it is already.
Oh, right.
And it's not a new term. And then it doesn't feel like such a big shift. Right. So if you say signals based change detection, then they say, okay, wait, change detection. I know what that is. Right. That's how, by which I know what things were updated, what to render on the screen, which children to be updated. I know what that is, but now it's based on signals instead of zones. Zones were not working for me. Well, signals could still work for me. Oh, I still like Angular. Okay. Because it's still the Angular that I know and love, right? So think about like problems from a different perspective. When you have millions of people using, we always have to think about like, if it were just me and 10 other people, we can do whatever we wanted, right? And just like change names and rewrite things. But when there's a million people,
no, that makes sense. That absolutely makes sense. I guess was worried that this negative stigma that is attached to zones, I was worried was also attached to change detection. And so I was like, let's throw it all out and just say we have signals now. But that totally makes sense. And it could still be used to define the process that's happening. So,
right. Just based on zones, based on signals. And who knows, we might find out that people are just like, yeah, this isn't what we want. And we might have to reconsider.
But
don't know.
I don't know. I think no matter, even if it's not exactly this that we're looking towards, the future is so incredibly bright because of this mindset that the team is moving forward of the best that it can be. And I don't know, it's very, for me, I'm very excited to see where it goes. And I honestly don't so much care where we land because I'm along for the ride with an amazing community. So yeah.
I usually try to temper people's expectations around stuff, to be realistic, but I'm not saying temper your expectations. I'm saying be as excited as you want to be about what's coming next, because I am just really blown away by the work the team has done on some of these features. Like I said, especially the server-side Angular and deferred loading with Angular template. I mean, this stuff is going to be magical. You just wait. Things that people had to try to figure out, these like fancy ways to like do things that will just become more trivial not trivial, more accessible for more developers, regardless of skill level, to be able to implement. And that's what I get so excited about, that I could teach this in an intro class, right? This doesn't have to be, Angular 1200. It can be like Angular 100. Like, let me show you how to lazy load a component. Defer. What else?
That's powerful. Defer. That's so powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But no, defer. Okay, but what about, okay, fine. Defer on buddy click. Right. But you know what I mean? Like, I don't have to talk about all these other things anymore. Right. We're thinking about like lazy loading, and there's going to be more to the story. I don't want to just give away all the magic. There's still more to the story. So people definitely want to tune in to our developer event in November. They want to be ready. That's all I can say.
Is that released? Like, do we have like a date of like the developer?
I have a date.
Oh, but we do not have the date yet. It is mystery date next month.
I got a date. I know everything. I'll say that. But I'm not going to say just yet. But you'll find out a lot more soon.
If people want to make sure they don't miss this, is this going to be like on the YouTube channel, the Google YouTube Angular channel?
You cannot afford to miss this next developer event for the Angular community from the Angular team. You can't afford to miss it. So definitely link in with us on X/Twitter. You can link in with us on YouTube. Okay. Like, both places are going to be great. Perfect. Check the blog for more details. I mean, we're going to be just making sure that everybody knows what's going on in these streets, in these Angular streets.
So if you're listening to this and you don't know what the date is yet, race over to Mark's Twitter. And
you got to. And follow while you're over there. I'm trying to get to 16 million before it all burns down.
There you go. Well, y'all did a masterful job of wrapping up here. I was going to pass it around for sort of one last thought or pitch for people that are listening and have been enjoying this conversation. For myself, I'll say this. I'm a bit of a computer gamer myself. And, one of the big examples of a game that's really popular right now, let's say, that hasn't always been popular in the past, was a No Man's Sky. It's a game, when it first came out, it was pretty widely panned. But the team didn't lose sight of what they were trying to do and trying to make it better bit by bit. And as people now are bouncing off of other games which maybe didn't quite release in the state that they hoped they did, they suddenly discovered this game that had in the interim become phenomenal. And I've seen a bunch of people talking about and raving about how much content there is, how enjoyable it is. And a lot of people are like, I remember this game, it was garbage before. And
I'm actually one of those people, and I will re-download it tonight because I did not
take
know
a look
that it
No, No Man's
Heard
Sky
amazing
is nowhere near like launch No Man's Sky, like the promise that they made in the
Wow.
beginning. They've kind of really delivered and more, I believe. And Rob, you're right. That is a fantastic example of like a development team hearing feedback, not getting into their feelings, but getting to work.
Yeah, and Angular wasn't broken in that way on delivery, but what I will say is that if you checked into Angular in the past and you haven't looked at it in 2-3 years, at this point, honestly, sometimes even a year, come back and try it again.
Oh, you'd be so surprised.
You would be amazed. A lot of the things that people bounced off of in the past have been addressed or smoothed over, or there's alternatives for it, or de-emphasized. And so it is everybody, like I said, most everybody that I talk to in the Angular world is the happiest I've seen them literally since it was announced. And so, I mean, it's just fun to be part of a community. Alyssa, you can speak to this as well. It's just fun to be part of a community that you've been in for so long, and the community just keeps getting happier. There aren't a lot of online communities for whom that's true. So
that's right.
Feel free to jump in. As we said, it's a very welcoming community. So there's great discords, community-led discords, community-led organizations to be a part of, and reach out.
And I will be giving an updated version of this in Bulgaria at the end of the month with more samples and things at DevReach. So if you're in the area, please come say hi. I would love to see you. But I thank you so much, Rob and Mark, for talking with me today about this stuff. I'm just so excited.
Yeah, and I'll say check me out in Atlanta at the end of the month. I'll be in Atlanta at Connect Tech and Refactor Tech talking all about Angular and AI and stuff around that. So please, if you're in the building or if you're in the streets around, come say hi. Would love to connect with people.
Well, wonderful. Well, that's going to be it for us today. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this Modern Web podcast on the Angular Renaissance. Thank you to our guests, Alyssa and Mark. As always, the conversation does not stop here. You can find Alyssa on Twitter at Alyssa Nicoll. That's ALYSSANICOLL. You can find Mark on Twitter at Mark Texon. That's MarkTechson. You can find me online at Rob Ocel. As for the podcast, you can find us online at moderndotweb.com or on Twitter at modern.web. Thank you, of course, to our sponsor, This.Labs. And This.Labs would like me to conclude by reminding you that trusted by top names like Meta, Google, and T-Mobile, This.Labs helps bridge the gap from business requirements to tech implementation. Whether you're modernizing legacy systems, ensuring sustainable application architecture, or seeking expert guidance, This.Labs has the experience to help. Discover more at this.co. That's THISDOT.co. Thank y'all.